and we are going to talk about monopsony. A monopsony is a situation, it's a market where there's a single buyer and many sellers. The buyer has all market power because it can determine the price. Each seller is a price taker. Okay, sellers have no market power whatsoever. Together, the supply of individual labor forms a supply of labor curve. Okay, in our example, we're gonna have the monopsonist employer maximize its profit by choosing the employment level L. So L is a non-negative. It can be perfectly divisible. Here I'm assuming it's possible to hire square root of 2 hours of labor. For instance, any fractions are okay. Okay. So the monopsonist is fully rational. It chooses the number of hours of labor, that maximize its profit. Okay, the monopsonists want to maximize its profit. That's the goal of the monopsonist employer. To do it, the monopsonist employer will make it the marginal revenue product equal to the marginal cost. So basically, marginal revenue equals marginal cost as usual. The profit of the employer, the monopsonist employer, will be again denoted by pi. Revenue is a function of how many hours of labor he hires minus the cost. So the cost is number of hours times W of L is the inverse supply, aggregate supply um, of labor. So there's a bijection between W and L. So L as a function of the wage is the aggregate supply of labor, and W as a function of L is the inverse function, the inverse supply of labor. Okay, so W of L is the salary that is necessary to offer so we can hire L hours of labor in the market. Okay, in the labor market. Okay, and if we pay W for each hour of labor and we have contract L hours of labor, we have to pay a total of L times W. So that's gonna be the cost here. I'm assuming no fixed cost in this example, in this next example. You could, of course, have a fixed cost here as well. So the cost of the monopolist employer is this. The marginal cost is the derivative, is that. Why do we have that? Well, suppose I hire one more worker, or one more hour of labor. I have to pay the salary for this extra hour. But on top of this, I have also to pay all the previous workers or hours uh, that I have previously hired, right? If I want to have an extra worker, I will have to offer higher salary. So for all the L previous workers that I had before, I'm changing what I have to pay. I'm increasing. That's the rate of changing what I'm paying. So if I want to hire more people, I have to pay a higher salary to attract one more person, and I have to pay this new salary to this one person, but I also have to pay the extra, the difference between the new salary and the old salary to all the people that I have already contracted. So it's, after all, it's I have to pay the same salary to everybody. Okay, that's the assumption here. So if I want to increase the number of hours, that's my marginal cost. That captures these two effects: the extra worker that I have and the extra amount of money for all the previous workers I have already had. Marginal revenue, we have this beautiful name here, is the marginal revenue product, and the profit is maximized when the marginal revenue equals to marginal cost. Okay, marginal revenue equals marginal cost in red, marginal cost in red here. Okay, so let's do a numerical example. if your revenue is 8 times the square root of L, so the revenue is increasing, and concave function of how many workers I have. The more workers I have, the higher is my revenue, but it's increasing at a decreasing rate. So the function is increasing, but it's concave, right? Each time the tangent has a smaller slope. My inverse supply of labor is given, well, if I want to contract L hours of work, I have to pay this salary. Okay, 2 times L. Just a numerical example. Okay, so if I take the derivative of the revenue, the 1/2 jumps in front. 4 times 8 is 4, and L to the power minus 1/2, so it goes to the denominator, the L to 1/2. My cost is L, number of hours of work, times the price of each hour of work. So here I have 2L for W, times L is 2L squared, and the derivative is 4L. Okay, so I make my marginal cost for L equals my marginal revenue, and the solution is 1 for this equation here. L star equals 1 is the solution. If I want to know my equilibrium wage, I compute W at L star, and W of 1, if I plug 1 here, is 2, the equilibrium wage. My profit is the revenue calculated at L star minus the cost of L star. L star is 1, so it's the revenue at 1 minus the cost of 1, and I can compute numerically what's my profit here in equilibrium. Okay, and here I will, in equilibrium, have 1 hour of labor, and the equilibrium wage is going to be $2. Okay, so basically this red here is the marginal cost, the blue the marginal revenue. This point is where the intercept, so this level here, 1, is going to be my equilibrium L, and my wage, well, the inverse supply is the green line, the inverse supply of labor is this. So if I want to contract 1 unit of labor, I have to pay the wage of $2. Okay, that's the case of the monopsonistic employer. Of course, what would happen in a perfect competition? In perfect competition, the supply equals demand, so we would be at the pink point here. We would have more people working, and the equilibrium wage would be higher. Okay, the equilibrium wage would be higher. So the monopsonistic employer ends up paying less and hiring fewer people than the free market, the perfectly competitive labor market. Okay, the pink is the perfectly competitive